Once again, welcome everyone to our Wheel and Anchor webinar, Italy, North to South. I'm really excited to tell you about Italy. This is the second time that Wheel and Anchor has run this very unique program through Italy, and it's unique because we cover a lot of ground on this 2-week trip. And when I say we cover a lot of ground, the nice thing about it is that we're only stopping well, this year actually we've changed a little bit. We're stopping in 3 places for a longer period of time for a few nights, and then Rome at the very end for a night, which then is a good segue. So let me first of all tell you a little bit about Wheel and Anchor. There's a few names here, at least a few, that are new, I don't recognize before. What we're all about. Well, Wheel and Anchor is a fully Canadian company. So we are here as a community servicing almost exclusively Canadian travelers, which is not to say that we wouldn't welcome those from other countries, but we really focus on Canadians. We design our programs for Canadians. The input is Canadians, all Canadian. I curate all the programs and with a view to designing trips that travelers go on as opposed to tourists. And so I could get into that. Some of you know my philosophy about travel and how we like to travel, because travel needs to be experiential. And that means you want to share that experience with other travelers, hence bringing travelers together. And at the same time, doing it at a pace that allows you to also explore on your own, because the joy of travel is not when you're sitting in the bus being told what's on the left and what's on the right, but it's when you go out and explore something on your own. So we bring those two things together. And that is really what our vision is about being well-traveled and well-connected. And, you know, for me, it's more than just being well-traveled is more than just ticking a box off a list. And I know many of us have those maps where we have pins in and so on. But it's about delving in a level deeper and learning about the culture, and learning about the customs and the people and their way of life and the food and the drink and all the rest of it. It's about becoming worldly. And there is something that is very gratifying about that at a personal level and at a social level. And so that's what we're really about in terms of being well-traveled. And being well-connected is about being part of a network of people who have that same philosophy. And we all have friends that we know who aren't travelers, and we want to go and tell them all about the great trips that we've had. But the people who aren't travelers are always a little bit less interested. They're not so keen to see all your photos from your trip. But when you hang out with people who are well-traveled, and you're connected with them, and not only people here in Canada, but people as well in other parts of the world, it's just a wonderful sense of fulfillment and being connected. So that's what my goal is inside of Wheel and Anchor on all of our trips and all of our events. Today joining me on the team is myself, of course. My name is Gordon. I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor. Many of you will have seen me before on one of my newsletter videos. I'm joined by my right-hand man, Joel Curry, who provides our technical support tonight, and by Paula Zarnick, who is our senior trip specialist. Paula and Joel are in the background. Today, I'll be doing all the talking, but they're here and they'll be available to answer any of your questions. Particularly Paula is the one who is now our frontline person looking after all of our members and their inquiries. So the plan this evening, as usual, you are a traveler, you are travelers interested in Italy. And I suspect because I know we had some people that have already been to Italy, but they may not have seen all of the highlights of Italy. And this is really one way to do it. So I'm going to be your guide, your fellow explorer, as we take a little tour of Italy this morning and really understand what it is that we're going to see. Italy needs no introduction. I mean, you see it on the map here. We all learned at school, the big boot with the soccer ball, which is Sicily. And Italy's a big country. It's the 6th most populous country in the world. It has a GDP that is similar to Canada, a little bit larger. And it is a tourist mecca. I mean, it's one place that we always get requested on anytime we survey our members. People always want to go there either for the first time or the second or the 10th time. It's just such a unique place for so many different reasons. We're going to get into some of them. One of them is wine, for sure. And I think that's one thing that bonds a lot of our Wheel and Anchor members together is wine, because Italy produces more of it than anywhere else in the world. Of course, Shakespearean plays, and we'll stop in Verona as well. So, I mean, Italy just, it has so much to offer that even on a 2-week tour like this, we're only just going to be scratching the surface. So let's take a look at the program, where it is that we're going to go. What does Italy north to south mean? Well, we're going to fly into Milan. We're going to fly out of Rome. And in the course of that 2-week period, we're going to spend a few nights up in the north part on the shores of Lake Garda, which is one of the fabled lakes in the Italian Lake District in the northern part on the with the backdrop of the Italian Alps. A spectacular place. We're going to spend a few days there. We're going to head down by coach to Florence, which is more in the central part of Italy, of course, Tuscany, and here see some highlights there, Cinque Terre, Siena, and so on. And then the last bit, we're going to head all the way down to Sorrento in the south, where we'll spend the last bunch of nights and visiting the Amalfi Coast, Capri, and so on, before then heading back to Rome, where some will undoubtedly stay on a few extra days, but that's where we'll fly home. So the beautiful thing is, for those who are in Southern Ontario, you can get nonstop flights into Milan and out of Rome, which is very, very handy. But for those of our members in other parts of Canada, there's lots of ways to get to both Milan and Rome. So let's dive right into the day-by-day itinerary. As I say, we're going to fly out invariably on the 13th of October, except for those that wish to come early. I know we had a few last year who popped into Milan a couple of days early because they wanted to take in that city. Once we get there, we're going to hop on our little coach and head to Desenzano, which is about an hour and a half drive or so, depending on traffic, from Malpensa Airport in Milan. And then you'll be here. And, you know, life will immediately look different as soon as you arrive in this spectacular little town on the shores of this lake. It is a super popular place in the summertime. You know, the nice thing about October is it's still busy. It stays busy, you know, except for the deep, dark winter months. It's busy all the time. But October is just past the peak season. So you can wander around the streets without tons and tons of people. And, you know, during the free time here, you also have the opportunity. It's situated at sort of a hub of the ferries that run to different parts of the lake. So you can venture out and around on your own. And this year, what is different is we're staying right in the heart of the town, as opposed to last year, we were a little bit further afield in a lovely hotel. But I felt that it was better to be in the center of things. So you can literally walk to cafes and restaurants and all the rest of the things. So we'll be here in Desenzano for 4 nights. And so by the time we arrive at the hotel, you'll probably just want to relax. And if it's a nice warm day, maybe you can sit out in front and sit on the promenade and look over the lake and just take it all in. It is truly, truly magnificent. We'll spend our next full day touring around a little bit the area of Lake Garda, specifically Sirmione, which is a narrow peninsula that juts out from the shore of the lake. And you know, what was reported as one of the highlights last year, I wasn't on the trip, it was Amber, and I was speaking to her not that long ago about this, and they had such a marvelous time. But she said in Sirmione, they were on this boat that they went to see the sulfur springs, and the lake is known for having hot springs that emerge from underneath the lake, and you know, the bubbling up of the water and the smell of the sulfur and so on. And it was really quite an experience for them. Lots of other things to see, but like on many of the days, we'll only be out for half a day. It'll enable you to have some time either staying in Sirmione on your own and then coming back on one of the great public buses, or coming back with a group and wandering around Desenzano. So it's a nice, relaxing way to start the tour. It'll get a little bit busier after that. Because then the next day we'll head down to Verona. We should be back in good time in the afternoon. Verona as well, you'll probably know from, you know, plays like Julius Caesar, and many of Shakespearean plays were set here in Verona. And it is just a really archetypical northern Italian town. And we decided to prolong the stay in Verona this year because many of our guests reported that there was a wonderful little market they didn't quite get enough time at. So we'll ensure that we have some time to visit Centro Storico, which is the historical center of Verona, and really get a feel for this part of northern Italy that, again, is what you'll see is as we progressed south into the Tuscany and so on, how different that it all actually is. So after that, we'll have a whole day of leisure. And I know that in last year's group, which I can imagine will happen again, is that the vast majority decided to hop off to Venice for the day. And the beautiful thing is that you can get on the high-speed Frecciarossa train right in Desenzano, and 90 minutes later, you're at Santa Lucia station in the middle of Venice. And the group just wandered out. Everybody did their own thing and just wandered and got lost. I encourage people, if you haven't been to Venice, you haven't been to Venice if you didn't get lost. walking down one of the streets there. You always manage to find your way back. The people are super friendly, and Venice is simply as far as I'm concerned, a world wonder. It's a magnificent city. And the best way, frankly, is to do it on your own. That's why we've left it as part of a program. So head off in the morning, come back in the afternoon. But of course, that's not the only thing that you can do. There are several other villages that you can access on Lake Garda that you can go up to. Gargano, for example. There are some hikes you can do. You can walk along the promenade along the lake. So if you've been to Venice already, you have other options. And as I say, what the reports that we got back from our members who went last year is they loved the flexibility and the fact that they could choose what exactly that they wanted to do with their time. So that'll be the free day, which probably won't be free, but it'll be busy wandering around Venice or wherever it is that you choose to go. And then the following day, we will move on to our next stop in Italy, which will be Florence. And on the way, we're going to pass through Parma. We're also going to pass through Rocchetta Mattai, which is a medieval castle. It was built by a private individual who still resides in the castle. It is often not on the list for a lot of ordinary tour groups, but we're not ordinary, which is why I insisted we stop there, and it was undoubtedly a highlight. It's about an hour out of Lake Garda, so we're there in good time. And following that, we get to go to an agriturismo. It won't be the only one we visit on this trip, but an agriturismo is effectively a farm-to-table type operation, right? You eat at the farm. And this region of Italy, Parma, of course, is known for their prosciutto, which you'll undoubtedly be familiar with. And, to taste it, right off the bone cut here in the country, in the region where it's made, is just an amazing experience. And it was, as you can imagine, it was reported as being one of the highlights of the trip was stopping at this agriturismo. And by later in the afternoon, we'll arrive in Florence. We're staying right in the middle of my favorite city in Italy, I think I can honestly say. And we'll spend a whole 5 nights here, which is great because you get to call Florence your home for that period of time, which enables you to go out and wander around and check it out on your own. So, sooner we arrive in Florence, we'll be heading off the next day for our first full day trip. Here we'll go to Pisa, which once again, you'll undoubtedly have heard of because of the Leaning Tower, that was constructed back 1,000 years ago almost, 1173, if I'm not mistaken. And, it had a slant right from the very beginning. The ground was too soft. I don't know. They didn't figure that part out. They built a lot of great monuments back then, but this one ended up being on an angle. It's so much so that they actually had to close it for several years to tourists because they were afraid it was actually going to fall over. So it still has its tilt and you can still go up it. And it will undoubtedly be the highlight of a great day. We'll also have a quick stop in Lucca, the nearby town, which you may not be familiar with, but has a very, very charming historical center. So Pisa and Lucca, certainly one of the must-see things to do in Italy. But I am personally a coastline person, and I always look forward to visiting Cinque Terre. So once again, we'll head out from Florence probably quite early in the morning because we want to maximize our day on this, one of the most photographed coastlines in all of Italy. And there are several villages. There's actually 5 of them that make up officially Cinque Terre, hence Cinque, meaning 5, and Terre. We'll get to visit at least 3 of them, like Manarola, which you can see pictured here. We're going to travel along the coast by both train as well as boat, depending on the weather conditions. We lucked out last year. In fact, we ended up swapping 2 of the days last year at the last minute because the weather wasn't going to be good. So we made some sort of panicked arrangement. I shouldn't say panicked. It wasn't panicked at all, but we managed to rearrange everything. And this is one of the things that I pride myself on in Wheel and Anchor is that changing things on the fly to suit what our members are after, which is the opportunity to visit a place like Cinque Terre in beautiful weather. So we'll spend a whole day here. We won't get back till after 7 o'clock in the evening. You won't want to leave, quite frankly. This will be one of the most memorable spots that we visit. Back in Florence, then, of course, we're going to have a half-day tour. So just a couple of hours in the morning that'll give you a sense of the city. By then, you'll probably have already wandered around because we'll, of course, have been staying there. And it is just as pretty at night as it is during the day. In some ways, it's actually even prettier at night. But we'll have some time to actually get oriented around what is where. But we've left most of the day free. Why? Because there are so many museums and things that are of specific interest to specific people. I mean, a lot of people, want to go to see the Statue of David at the Uffizi Gallery. So what we encourage people who come along on the trip is figure out what it is that you want to see. We'll give you the tips. We'll tell you about Duomo, which you can see in the picture, or the Accademia Gallery. But a lot of you know already what it is that you're after in Italy. And you'll probably find it in Florence, and you can easily go online for Uffizi and book your tickets in advance, and there's all kinds of different options. And this is really the opportunity. You could do things on the fly as well, but for certain things, it's a good idea in Florence to do a little bit of research, figure out what you want to do. Personally, I've done it all in Florence, I can honestly say. So I like to go and sit on a cafe on the river and just take in this magnificent city. It's, as I say, it is truly it's my favorite city in Italy. I can say that hands down. Our next day, we'll be heading out for yet another full day tour. And here we're going to head into the hill countryside of Tuscany outside of Florence. We'll first be hitting up Siena, which may be a term to some of you. I remember Siena from my backpacking days 30 years ago, and the Piazza del Campo and all these. It's just truly really an amazing city. But the one that is the one that is somewhat lesser known is San Gimignano, or otherwise known locally as San Jimmy, if you don't want to take a chance at pronouncing the name. And it's kind of like they call it the Manhattan of Tuscany because they refer to all these towers that you see here as skyscrapers. Well, they're not nearly as high as skyscrapers, but relative to the ancient buildings that have made up the town, they are quite a sight to see, and also quite handy because you can orient yourself more easily than a lot of these historical towns. So Siena and San Jimmy will be on our program for that day, and then we will wrap up our trip in the central part of Florence, having gotten a great flavor for it, and we'll have some fun taking the train down to Naples. And so the railway station is not far away from our hotel in Florence, and we'll get once again on the Frecciarossa, which is this high-speed train, goes at about 250 kilometers an hour. It's an adventure for those who have not traveled by high-speed rail before, and it zooms all the way down the country, and a few hours later we arrive in Naples, where we'll be assisted onto our coach and have a quick tour of Naples before we head down towards the famous Amalfi Coast and Sorrento, which is where we'll be staying for the last part of our journey. And Sorrento is really the gateway to this area called the Amalfi Coast, which, once again, if you haven't already heard from it, these pictures will give you just some sense about it. In fact, the first day that we're there will be a tour out to Positano on the Amalfi Coast. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The pictures hardly even do it justice because it is, it's this 360 panorama between the sea and these villages that climb right up the sides of these very steep mountains. Summertime is insane. That's why, again, October is a great time to go. It's still busy. It's always busy. It's busy all year round on the Amalfi Coast, but it's at least a little bit less manic on these narrow, crazy roads that the Italians drive on. They're known for lemons. You can take the lemons right off the tree and eat them with the skins on, and that's how good the lemons are down here. There's all kinds of neat things to see, and we'll take the time to enjoy it on our own pace. And in fact, we again have built in here a leisure day in this area, because for some people it's just not enough. Like one day isn't enough, and so you can hop on a bus from Sorrento. You're there in Positano or one of the other villages on the Amalfi Coast in a relatively short period of time, and you can wander around on your own. In fact, for those that are a little bit more active, want to do some hiking, there's some spectacular hikes in these mountains in behind Positano and up into the hills. So that's an option, but even though it's a relaxing trip, it's still a busy trip. So you may want to just hang around Sorrento and visit. They have the area is famous for cheese, like bocconcini. If you want to know where it comes from, you can visit a cheese factory in Sorrento, or you can just go and have a glass of wine. They make some terrific wines in southern Italy that we are less familiar to us than the ones in northern Italy, in Veneto and Valpolicella and all those areas. So lots of things that you can do while enjoying a day in Sorrento. One of the other highlights, they're all highlights. I mean, Italy is always a highlight, everything about it. And again, the reviews that we got back from last year were just amazing. But we'll go over to see Capri. And Capri is a beautiful island. It's a jet set island. So the people that actually have homes there are sort of usually from the rich and famous set. We'll take a ferry over to Capri, and you'll be just totally captured by the beauty of its stark coastline. For those, we'll spend a couple hours touring around in a mini coach. But again, Capri is about going off on your own a little bit. You can take a cable car up to one of the highest points that has a view like the one that you see in the picture here. You can take a boat ride to some of the grottos. Capri, of course, is famous for the Blue Grotto. The Blue Grotto, though, I kind of recommend against because it's a long lineup. Like sometimes you can wait 2 or 3 hours. Just go through the Blue Grotto in 15 minutes. There are other grottos. So again, many opportunities for this day to travel by boat, to go by cable car, and just take in all the Capri has to offer. So that will wrap up our stay in this part of Italy, and we'll be gradually making our way back. On the way back to Rome, though, we're going to stop at Pompeii. And this was a change that we made from the trip last year, because last year we did it as an excursion from Naples. We went from Sorrento, we went over all the way to Pompeii and came back. And the feedback that we got was it'd be better to do Pompeii on the way out. So it's a couple of hours tour. Pompeii itself is one of those places, again, you've probably heard of. You may know that it was buried by Mount Vesuvius eruption back in about 80 years after Christ, I should say. But walking through this town that was completely alive and people living in it, and it was a big city back in the day that were literally completely destroyed from one day to the next. It's very eerie feeling when you walk through Pompeii, and it'll make quite a nice sort of last stop on the trip. And we'll drive up there. A couple hours later, we'll end up in Rome for our last night. And again, I suspect some people will want to stay over in Rome. And if not, you can enjoy an evening wandering around, taking in the Colosseum, some of the other spectacular historical buildings that Rome has to offer. And then that will round out the trip, and you will have really seen the best of what Italy has to offer on this trip. And from Rome, again, make your way back. So let's cover some of the details, some of the logistical details about our program through Italy, happening middle of October. So same time as last year. The weather is perfect at this time of the year, as far as I'm concerned. It's not too hot. It can definitely get into the mid-20s, though. You'd be surprised. So it's warmer than we have it at home in Canada. Pricing shown here for double and single occupancy. Everything, of course, that we do is in Canadian dollars. What it includes. So this is all of the arrangements in Italy, basically all of your transportation, all your accommodations. We have picked out very nice 4-star hotels. We have lunch or dinner every day. And I like to mix it up a bit because I find that most people don't want to be fed three meals a day. You want to sort of pick away at either lunch or dinner, depending on how the itinerary is going. But of course, we include all of the porterage and the service charges and the tips, and everything is built into the program. So other than some meals and any souvenirs or wine that you might decide to buy along the way, pretty much everything is in the program. What's excluded? Airfare, which I'll tell you about in a moment. Trip insurance, which is really, really recommendable. And as I said, any other meals and beverages that are not included. So talking about airfare, so we separate airfare from our programs, just it gives our members a greater degree of flexibility. And we have been able, in this case of this particular flight, this particular program, to secure some pretty good flights. So we have fares from Toronto. They can be added on from other cities in Canada. This is, of course, with Air Canada. So we've got economy class fares at about $1,000 return. This is including all taxes and surcharges and so on that are available. But particularly for premium economy and even business class, we've managed to secure a limited number of very, very good prices. So if you've always thought, oh, Europe, it's such a pain in the ass to fly, pardon my French, you could snag a business class ticket for almost half price if you're able to book on with us. So that's a nice feature for those that like to have a little bit of luxury in the air. So let's move right along to our questions and answers. Of course, you can ask questions at any time by sending me an email personally or to Paula, who can be reached at bookings@wheelandanchor.ca or info@wheelandanchor.ca. There's always somebody here to answer your questions. In the meantime, I'd like to ask a few of the questions about that, from anybody that's got some questions now. So if you haven't already typed your questions into the box, please do that now, and I will, in the meantime, take a few questions from those members who have either emailed in advance because they couldn't be here on the webinar now, or the questions that have come in. So, for example, Bob asked how much walking is on this tour. Bob, it is a walking tour. There's no question about it. And you can't visit the old cities of Italy without walking quite a distance. So we say moderately strenuous. I would definitely say it's on the strenuous side of moderately strenuous, just because you're going to have to walk on an average day, I would say at least 1 to 2 kilometers. There'll be breaks, so it's not a race. We like to take time to stop and have a cup of coffee. Italy's got, of course, the best coffee anywhere, or a glass of wine, but you need to be prepared to walk. Okay. Then we got a question here, let's see, that just came in from Liam. I'd like to see Milan. How many days should I come earlier to do that? So Milan, I like Milan. I've been there countless times. I think it's an interesting city. I think it's a city that you can largely see on your own, because most of what there is to see is really located in and around the Centrale railway station. So you can walk a lot of it. But I think probably 2 full days in Milan would suffice. So if you arrived in the morning, you'd have the rest of that day and then the following day. That's probably already enough for Milan. It depends. If you're really a fashionista, you want to see all the fashion houses, that might take a little extra time. But I think an extra 2 nights in Milan would be more than sufficient if you wanted to do that. Tina asked how many wine tastings we will do. Geez, Tina, that's a good question. I didn't count them all up. This isn't a wine tour, but I think there are at least 4 opportunities on this trip for wine tastings. Certainly at the Agriturismo, and we will specifically go and see and taste some wine when we're down in the south part of Italy, because you may not be familiar with it. So there's at least 4, and we try to throw in an extra one when we can. So we'll make sure that you get to have lots of wine. And let's see, I got one more question here from Judith. How do the free days work? Do you sell optionals? Yeah, the free days work that they are truly free. So I am not of the philosophy that we want to sell optionals so that we can nickel and dime our members on every single thing that they do while they're on tour. We try to include everything that's important, but we also try to include free time. And so the free time works as it is free. And so you are at leisure to do whatever it is that you want. So for example, what we did with Venice last year is we sent out a message to the members a few weeks before the trip and said, who's interested in coming to Venice? We booked the tickets for them at cost, charged it on their card, and then they sort of went off to Venice for the day. And I think the return ticket was about 40 euros. In fact, it was in business class on the train, believe it or not. So it was very reasonable, and whatever else that they decided to do that day, whether it was go for a gondola ride or take a tour of a museum somewhere or go up the Campanile in St. Mark's Square, it was all at their own cost, and so there's nothing being sold to you. We don't. It's not how we work at Wheel and Anchor. But we will point you in the right direction between our local guides and our host. If you say, well, I'm really interested to do this, then obviously we're there to facilitate that for you so that you can go and explore the Italy that you want to see. So that's how it works, Judith. Good. I don't see any other questions here. But if you do have them, and I'm sure I will hear from many of you, I see a great number of people have joined us since we started the webinar a little over half an hour ago. So thank you for coming out today. We will send you a copy of this webinar, and you feel free to look at it again or send it off to a friend if you have somebody that's interested. We'll also send along a copy of the brochure, which has just been released and has all the details in it. And I hope to welcome you on the tour to Italy this coming October. So as always, please join us on Thursday for our next webinar about island hopping in Greece. And otherwise, I look forward to catching up with all of you at an event sometime soon. So have a great day.